Welcome back to the Woodlands. I am Riley Woodsman. The line at Walmart is not a joke, because it has been a year since the last video, and I am overdue. So, Butcher's Creek has been out for almost a year. It's been about 8 months, at least at the time of this video. And like I said earlier, it's also been a year almost since I made a video on the demo of the game. So needless to say, this channel probably needs its tires rotated, and it's also probably due for an oil change. Now, this video is gonna be a little weird to make, to be honest, because my original intentions were to make a video on the demo, show how excited I was, and then when the final game released, make a full, proper review of it. But the problem is that the game didn't expand nearly as much as I was hyping it up to. But that's not to say that the game was disappointing, because it wasn't. I loved the living hell out of the game. It's the closest thing to a new Condemned game that we're ever gonna get. I think I just probably expected it to be like Condemned 3, I guess, but it's not Condemned 3. It was not supposed to be Condemned 3. So this game is going to be a little bit of an experiment, I guess. It's not going to be a full review of the final game, or at least I don't think it will, but I will talk about what's new in the final game, and the real meat of this video is I'm going to try my best to compare it to Condemned, the game that directly inspired it, and also be fair about it. And the reason why I say try to be more fair is because I have to make this little note here. Butcher's Creek was made by one person. Condemned was a team effort. One of them is an indie game, and the other is a AAA full title. So as a result, this comparison might feel a little unfair at times. I love both games very much. And because Butcher's Creek is an indie title, it gets free passes that Condemned does not, but I still have some criticisms to give. I just realized that this is the second video and I'm still talking about the same fucking games. I promise next time I will talk about something different, I swear. So when I went into the game, I was under the impression that it was going to be around the same length as Condemned, because David Szymanski said it's going to be around 4 hours. He said his goal was going to be around that length, and Condemned is exactly 4 hours long. Like, it's, I guess not exactly, it's around the ballpark, but you get what I'm saying. It's not 4 hours. It's not. It's like 2. And it's one of those things that's really weird for me to complain about, to be honest, because I'm not really one to complain about how long a game is. I don't really value a game based on its length. I value it based on how fun it is. But I'm not gonna deny it was a little disappointing when I completed the game a lot faster than David Szymanski said I was gonna be able to. That's more of a problem with me than the game, to be honest. At least that's the way I feel about it, because the game is still fantastic. Editor Riley from the future here. So I said that David said that the game is going to be 4 hours long. There's a bit of a correction I have to make with that. He said he was aiming for the game to be 3 hours long, actually. Now, I know that's not that big of a difference, but it's big enough for me to feel like I have to correct that. So I'll also try to correct that throughout the rest of the video without breaking the video in half, because it might seem inconsistent and also less fair, I guess. But yeah, just that. Anyways, on with the video. On top of that, David doesn't make long games unless he's making Dusk. He's been making it a point for the last few years that he doesn't want to make a super long game. He prefers shorter experiences. So I'm going to try to keep that in mind when making some of these criticisms. And I know it's weird because I don't normally complain about length. But enough of that. Let's take that part and throw it in the dumpster and move on to the game's content. The demo was a demonstration. Did I write that? The demo was a demonstration of the gameplay. I mean, I fucking hope it was. The demo was a demonstration of the core gameplay and the overall vibe. The final game is literally just more of that. Like, there's a few new weapons and a few new enemy types, but more than anything, there's new levels, which I feel is the most important. I definitely felt that there was enough weapons. Maybe it could have used a little bit more, which I guess that he did give us that, but I definitely wish that there was a little bit more enemy types just to make it feel a little bit more lively. lively, is that the right word? So there's 2 new weapons and 2 new enemies, 2 of each. There's the very powerful axe. It can't be blocked by enemies, and it does a crazy amount of damage. It can kill people really fast, but it has a slow swing, so it's one of those high risk, high reward type of weapons. Then there's the intentionally overpowered pickaxe at the end of the game. It has an absurdly long reach and super powerful damage. So in a nutshell, the 2 new weapons are signature tool for Kratos, Norse Kratos, and then signature tool for Steve, Minecraft Steve. As for the new enemies, there's the welding mask guys. They're pretty strong and they can take most of your hits. Then there's the invisible guy, who is exactly like the default guy, but invisible. So technically, the only real new enemy to fight is the guy that's probably named like John Welding Mask. Now, in all honesty, I think that's fine because of the length of the game. Since it's not super long, it doesn't need to introduce a whole lot more. I basically just wanted what the demo had, but 3 hours more of it. Obviously, if I had it my way, I would have more weapons and more enemies, make the game longer, but the game does a decent job of making them feel different enough. I do feel like it's worth mentioning though, there are 4, technically 5 enemies, and the biggest difference between them is just their appearance. In terms of functionality, they're all almost exactly the same. The most different that they get is that they won't stagger if you hit them when they're swinging at you already. Also, some of them walk faster than others. Those are really the only differences that you'll see for their functions. If it wasn't for appearance, you would think that they were all exactly the same enemy. Now, as I said before, given the length of the game, this isn't really that big of a problem. They're different enough to make the game feel more dynamic. I definitely wish that there was more weapons and enemies, but the combat feels so good and it's so fun to play that I honestly can't really complain that much. No matter what enemy you're fighting, you're always going to have fun fighting them. That's all I have to say about the weapons and enemies, but I do have a bit of a problem here. I don't know how to transition into the next chapter in a smooth way, so I'm gonna say Dr. Pepper, and hopefully it'll transition smoothly when I say it. Dr. Pepper. There are quite a bit more new levels, and some of them are so, like, quiet and tense that it was actually hard for me to get through them because I was afraid. It does a great job of scaring you with literally nothing happening. Most of these levels are basically just extensions of what we saw in the demo, while others are like heightened versions of those levels. Some of the things that you see when going through them is pretty disturbing. The level of torture and violence and complete savagery is taken to the extreme, many of which only showed what remains of people's bodies. All of their bodies have been torn up and so ripped apart that you can't even tell who that person used to be. You can't see a single unique detail on them. Literally all they are now is just rotting flesh. However, a lot of these levels show that this is a lot more than just a cult of insane people. These people are worshiping someone, or rather something, and that something is very real, and they can't contain it any longer. While most of these levels just are old abandoned buildings, there are some that go a lot deeper than that. I don't like saying this, but it's true. Very liminal. A lot of these levels look very liminal, like something out of the back rooms. I feel a personal highlight for me was when it was all outside in the rain and you could barely see anything. It was during a thunderstorm, so sometimes lightning would flash and give you some light for only a split second. However, when that lightning would strike, you could see someone in the distance, and they saw you well before you saw them. I don't think this is the first game to do something like this, but it was definitely my first time experiencing it, that's for sure. So I'm giving credit to the game, because that almost made me shit myself. And the demo already made me soil my jorts. So while I definitely feel that the game is a little lacking in the weapons and enemy variety, I feel like it's mostly made up with the new levels that we get. The keyword is mostly. I know the game was never meant to be anything more than what it is, but I really feel that if it's not lacking in at least length, then it's definitely lacking in extra content. And again, I know, the game was never meant to be more than what it is, but I'd still have to criticize that. Something that I would do to add a little extra spice to the game, a little extra content, It's something that I feel that a lot of games could definitely work with, and I don't think that this is an exception here. Some sort of survival mode. Maybe 1 to 3 maps, doesn't need to be that many. And just make endless waves of enemies, survive as long as you can. Dusk is at least 4 times longer than Butcher's Creek, and even that has an endless survival mode. I really think that Butcher's Creek would have benefited a lot from something like that. I honestly would have preferred that over a longer story mode, to be completely honest. Having extra game modes tends to make the game feel a lot bigger than what it actually is. But I think the biggest thing that could be added that I think makes the most sense is some sort of sandbox mode. The game has great physics. The ragdoll physics are great, and messing with like the objects around the environments, those are also great. The fucking like green anomalies that make people fly away in a small explosion, those are fantastic. The spinning saw blades that instantly kills enemies and makes their body do funny things, those are great. Hell, even being able to just kick explosive cans at them, that's already great. The amount of potential here for just a sandbox mode is like actually kind of insane. It doesn't feel like Pony Factory or Squirrel Stapler made by the same guy, where they were short and they felt like they were supposed to be short. I think the combat being so fun and like the physics engine being great with like the ragdoll physics and the objects and whatnot, even though the game is not supposed to be more than what it is, it still feels like that it was. And I don't really know how to explain that, to be honest, because it genuinely feels like that there's something missing, even though there isn't. The game is not meant to be more than what it is, but it feels like it was supposed to be more than what it is. I feel like having only a 2-hour game mode with combat that's as fun as it is, and ragdoll physics that are as great as it is, and just the physics sandbox, I feel like it's just really a lost opportunity. Maybe I care too much about the game. Maybe I was just expecting it to be more than what it is and I didn't realize it. But come on, doesn't a survival mode sound great? Doesn't a sandbox mode sound great? Well, it does to me. And the game is not supposed to be any more than what it is. While I fully understand why David Szymanski doesn't make games as long as Dusk or have as much extra content as Dusk, and I understand that he just prefers to make smaller games, I'm just always going to have my disagreements with that. Especially when I enjoyed a game as much as I did with Butcher's Creek. Well, that's the end of that part of this tangent, so now we can move on to the actual meat of the bones, the depths of the ocean, the dough of the cookie. What the fuck am I talking about? As I said earlier, I can't give a full review of Butcher's Creek because most of what I had to say is already in the previous video. However, I can show you directly where my complaints and compliments directly come from. And I'm gonna do that by comparing it to the game that inspired it in the first place. So without further ado, let's compare Butcher's Creek to SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. That was not written in the script, I just felt like saying that. We're comparing it to Condemned. I've been talking a lot about how long the games are, and I promise I'm done with that. Almost. I'm not. I have one more thing to say, and then I'll move on. Like I said before, I was under the impression that Butcher's Creek was going to be 4 hours long, and it is only half that length. And the reason I was excited for that is because Condemned actually is 4 hours long. And again, I'm not normally one to judge a game based off of how long it is. But when a game is under 6 hours long, every second becomes crucial. So I'm not even going to go into detail about the length of the games, because Condemned wins by default. Now, I'm done. I'm done with talking about the length of the game, I promise. So I feel to compare them properly, I'm going to talk about the most important part of each game, which is just the combat, the core gameplay of both games. Now, obviously, these games function very similarly to each other. You have the basic attack, sprint, kick, and parry buttons. However, all of these things have some pretty big differences, despite looking and feeling pretty similar. So in Butcher's Creek, you have a stamina meter. The meter is tracked to attacking, sprinting, and kicking. Kicking doesn't do any actual damage, but it gets enemies away from you if you get swarmed, and it will cost you some stamina. Swinging your weapon is obviously the main damage you do against enemies. The heavier the weapon, the more damage you do, but every weapon costs the same amount of stamina per swing. Then of course, there's sprinting. We all know it. You hold down shift to move faster, and it drains your stamina as you run. If the stamina bar runs out, you cannot do any of these functions. Now, here's where it gets pretty interesting, at least for me. In many games that have stamina, the only thing that you can really do to refill it is to just wait for it to recharge. You can do that in Butcher's Creek, just wait for it to fill back up, but if you get hit, it resets the timer, so you have to wait longer again. And even then, if you're in the middle of a fight and you're still dodging attacks, it feels like it's taking 3 to 5 business days to actually recharge. However, if you can I just hit the fucking mic. However, if you parry their attacks, then your stamina recharges instantly. If you get good at blocking, this game becomes child's play. So all that stuff I just said about like the stamina bar, having to pay attention to it, in Condemned, you can forget 90% of that. There is a stamina bar, but it's only tied to your sprint. It's not tied to anything else. You can swing as much as you want, kick as much as you want, and blocking does not restore it. All you really have to think about is smacking tweakers and not getting smacked by tweakers. Some would say Butcher's Creek handles stamina better with how much more engaging it is, while others would say Condemned is better because it's a lot less stressful to deal with. I personally sit with Condemned on this one because it's just a lot easier to pick up and play. You can call me a fake gamer, but I'm too employed to get frustrated with games nowadays. I love a challenge, but not too much of one. Now, there's more to it that makes these games different, but nothing actually. I'm gonna get into it because that's the point of this video. In Butcher's Creek, you can snap pictures at enemies, which can stagger them. However, there's not much point to this since the kick staggers them so much, and it's a lot easier to use. You might as well just ignore the camera for combat. In Condemned, however, you have a taser, which will recharge over a short period of time. The taser is so overpowered that it actually makes the game too easy. Whenever I play the game, I try to avoid the taser as much as possible just because of how insanely overpowered it is. This is definitely something that I think Butcher's Creek does better. This isn't what I meant when I said I was too employed. The taser is basically playing the game for me. It becomes so easy. Now, in terms of healing and health, you saw from the last video, I assume, this is something that's just objectively more interesting and a lot more fun to get into than it is compared to Condemned. In Condemned, it's as simple as looking for a health pack. Nothing more, nothing less. Sometimes health packs feel super common, and other times they feel so rare that the game will actually get really tense as a result. Your health will get really low, and you start worrying about the next encounter because it's been a while since your last health pack and you just took a lot of damage. However, all you can do is look for a health pack. There's no other way to get health back, and there really doesn't need to be. Butcher's Creek, on the other hand, has a much more interesting health system. I already went into it in the last video, but I'll do a more simplified version here. The most common source of health is taking pictures of blood and gore that you find or make. If you kill someone and take a picture of their blood, you'll regain a small amount of health. If you chop off their head and you take a picture of their severed head, then you'll get more health. If you find blood from a torture scene, then you'll regain a large amount of health. And if you find Polaroid pictures, you'll get a massive amount of health. By default, you start out with a very small health bar, about 50%. If you find VHS tapes, you'll increase your maximum health up to 10 tapes. You can use those tapes to unlock secret doors, which can lower your maximum health unless you stay above 10 tapes. Saving your game will also cost a tape, so if you're at 10 tapes or less, you'll sacrifice some health to save your game. You get all that? No? Fuck. Butcher's Creek wins for health system. That is way more interesting than just a health pack. I think that covers all the main parts of the gameplay. They both play pretty similarly, but there's a bunch of small changes that make them both feel drastically different as a result. And I didn't even go into detail about the weapons or enemies in Condemned, and that's because there's more. A lot more. So much more that Condemned has fucking guns, and there's so many different kinds of enemies that it's not even worth comparing the games in this department. Condemned wins this part by a landslide. So anyways, we covered the main parts of the gameplay, so now we are going to move on to what I like to call the side hose. What? So you already heard me talking about the potential of Butcher's Creek's sandbox and its physics. Basically the ragdoll physics, the objects you can pick up, the way you can make them fly around, the literal chopping of heads that could be done. It has a lot of potential. You can't do anything in Butcher's Creek that isn't the story mode. So the most that I can really say for Butcher's Creek's side gameplay is the physics sandbox. Basically just messing around with the ragdolls and the objects. Other than that, there's nothing. But looking at it for what it is, whenever you finish combat and you're just in a map full of ragdoll bodies and objects around the environments. Messing with the ragdolls and the objects, it's a lot of fun. The physics in that game and just messing around with the physics, it's a lot of fun. Comparing this to Condemned, I was originally going to say that there isn't much in this game either, but I forgot that the game literally opens up with doing detective work. You're investigating a crime scene, scanning for fingerprints, trying to figure out how a victim was murdered, leading you on a trail to find a serial killer. There are actually quite a few crime scene investigations in the game. I understand that some people may not care for these segments, but I honestly love them. I think it's funny that these segments would be like a wet dream for true crime fans. As a game, I like these parts a lot, but I do find it funny that like a true crime fan would see this and like squirt in their fucking panties. The investigations are more so used as a way to break up the core gameplay to make it feel more spaced out, a little more dynamic. I can understand if someone plays these and thinks that they're too boring or that they don't do much to make it feel bigger. However, it works for me. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, to be honest, but I genuinely love the investigations. Now, a fair argument to make is that these parts are required to play. You can't skip them. In Butcher's Creek, the side gameplay, the sandbox and whatnot, it's optional, but let's be real, it's way more fun than crime scene investigations. Ragdolls are fun and everything, and you cannot change my mind. So when it comes to the side stuff, those are the main things that each game has. Butcher's Creek has the sandbox, and then Condemned has the crime scene investigations. They both have secrets throughout each game as well. The secrets to find in Butcher's Creek are 80% weapons and health, and the other 20% is notes to find that extend the lore. Comparing this to Condemned, once again, it just has more to find. You can find dead birds in Condemned. That's very cute and fun. Honestly, I've never been able to find all the birds. There's a ton of them, and they're all really hard to find. The Xbox 360 version actually had secret Xbox 360s to find, which the PC version just changes them to TVs. I'm not a huge fan of that. I would much rather have Xbox 360s because I am a sucker for it. All in all, there isn't too much side stuff in either game because there isn't supposed to be. It's great that it's there and the games are better for it, but the devs knew that the main focus was smacking a tweaker with a fucking pipe. I think to close this off, I'll just start sucking off Butcher's Creek like it's my fucking wife. So I criticized Butcher's Creek a lot, and I compared it to a AAA game just to give context for those criticisms. But even though I said some harsh stuff, or at least it felt harsh, I still really feel like it's a fantastic game, especially when you consider the fact that it was made by just one guy, or at least a very tiny team, but I'm pretty sure it's just one guy. While I definitely prefer the way the combat feels in Condemned, I'm surprised at how much heavier Butcher's Creek feels. Condemned feels a little bit more smooth in my opinion, but the attacks themselves are very heavy in Butcher's Creek. They feel massive. Not to mention that it has a very interesting health system, one I've never seen in any game before. I know that David Szymanski didn't want the game to be any longer or bigger than what it is, but I'm just always going to see that as lost potential. I feel like that there's just a lot that should have been done with the game that was just never meant to have happened in the first place. But even with that, I will never deny how fun the game is. It is really fun. It's actually so fun that I started to speedrun the game. My fastest time was 32 minutes. Given that the game is 2 hours, that's probably not that long, but I'm proud of that, and you cannot take that away from me. I have an average size penis. For me, the most important part of a game is replayability. I always saw a second or third playthrough as more important than a first playthrough, because if you're coming back to the game, you're getting more than your money's worth. I always feel sad or let down when I finish a game and then just never really come back to it, and then I think about it later and I'm like, huh, I don't really have any desire to play that. And this most commonly happens to me when a game is above like 15 hours long. I prefer shorter games, so the longer the game is, the less likely it is that I replay it. And yes, while I do wish that Butcher's Creek was longer, a massive upside is how replayable it is. I have replayed it many times. It's genuinely a great game, and it comfortably sits in my top 5 games of 2025. I legitimately love the game. Now, yes, Condemned is a better game, but of course it is. It's a AAA game made in 2006, and in my opinion, 2006 is one of the years that was in the golden era for video games. Basically, 2001 to 2013, in my opinion, was the golden era. Kind of a side topic. I might talk about that in another video, but we'll see. So my 2 cents, Butcher's Creek isn't perfect, but the core gameplay is so fun that it'll bring you back again and again and again and again. So that means you should buy it, and then play it, and then play it again and again and again until the next thing you know, you're waking up in a dumpster covered in sweat. I've had that happen once or twice, to be honest, when playing the game. Yeah, life is really hard, man. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Remember to destroy that like button and then violate the subscribe button. What the fuck? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in whatever I make next.